The heavy oak doors of the courthouse swung open with a long, reluctant groan. The marble floor shimmered beneath the afternoon light, polished to such perfection that it reflected every step like a memory refusing to fade. People filed out slowly, their voices a murmur, their glances quick. A man in a tailored black suit stood at the top of the steps, frozen, not because the air was cold, but because something had shattered inside him the moment he heard it. Two voices, thin, trembling, too young to belong in such a place, cut through the noise like a blade. "Daddy!" He didn't move. The briefcase slipped from his hand, landed with a soft thud, but he barely noticed. His name wasn't Michael that day. Nor was he the title engraved on the plaque above his office door, CEO of Billionaire Holdings, master of mergers, man who never lost a case or a negotiation. No. In that moment, he was just a man who had built a fortress of order and silence around himself, and watched it crack wide open with one word. One word, from two mouths he'd never seen before. The crowd turned. Lawyers paused mid-conversation. A reporter, stunned, lowered his microphone. And the two girls, identical down to the small star-shaped scar on their left brows, ran down the steps barefoot, their little dresses soaked from rain that had only just stopped falling. One clutched a tiny teddy bear. The other held something even smaller, a worn photograph. They didn't look lost. They looked determined. Like they'd rehearsed this. "Daddy," they said again, louder this time, not with fear but urgency. Hope. Pain. The kind of ache only a child abandoned long enough can put into a single word. And Michael, who had just won custody of another child in a courtroom battle that had consumed months of his life and millions of dollars, couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. His heart clenched as if someone had reached into his chest and pressed down, reminding him that for all his power, he had no control here. Not over them. Not over this. The security guard beside him stepped forward instinctively, but Michael raised a trembling hand. No. The girls stopped a few steps away, panting, rainwater still dripping from their hair. Their eyes, impossibly blue, stared up at him. The older one, if you could call a difference of seconds age, held up the photo. "This was in Mommy's box. She told us to find you if anything happened. She said you'd know. She said you'd help." He took the photo. His fingers shook. And when his eyes met the image, the world spun. There, in grainy black and white, was a younger version of himself. Arm around a woman whose smile had once made every room feel warmer. She was gone. Dead. That's what they'd told him. 7 years ago. Car crash. No survivors. No funeral. Just ashes, silence, and a hole too deep to fill. But this photo had a date stamped on the back. 5 years ago. 5. His knees buckled, but he didn't fall. He forced himself upright. Around them, the courthouse crowd began to disperse, as if none of it were real. As if life could go back to normal. Where is your mother?" he asked, his voice hoarse like it hadn't been used in years. The younger girl wiped her nose with the sleeve of her soaked sweater. "She's in the hospital. She said to be brave. She said if she couldn't wake up, we had to come find you. Because you're all we have left." Michael closed his eyes. Not to block them out, but to block out the storm in his mind. Memories crashed like waves, faces, voices, promises made under starlight, tears shed behind closed doors. He had spent years forgetting. Erasing. Moving forward. But the past, it seemed, had never left him. It had just been waiting. He looked at the girls again. Same eyes. Same jawline. A freckle beneath the left ear, he remembered it. Not on them. On her. The older girl pulled something else from her pocket. A necklace. Silver. A small, heart-shaped locket with a broken hinge. He had given that to her, Elena. Their last Christmas. She had cried, but said nothing. And then she had disappeared into the snowstorm and never returned. I don't understand, he whispered, more to himself than them. They told me you were gone. She never stopped talking about you, the older twin said, her voice steadier than he expected. She said you were her mistake, and her miracle. She said you left before you knew we existed. Michael flinched. A wound reopened. The sound of a distant siren snapped him back. He crouched down, slowly, so he could meet them at eye level. What are your names? Liana, the older one said. And I'm Kaya, said the younger. Mommy says we're a lot like you. Always asking why. He reached out. His hand hovered for a moment, unsure, then gently brushed a strand of wet hair from Kaya's forehead. She didn't pull away. Liana held out the teddy bear. She made this when we were in the shelter. She said if we ever found you, to give you this too. The stitching was uneven, one eye missing. But on its chest, in clumsy thread, were 3 initials, MEK. Michael Everett Kane. He stood slowly, the bear in one hand, the photograph in the other. The courtroom behind him. The future ahead, terrifying and unknown. And 2 daughters, 2 pieces of his soul he never knew were missing, looking up at him like he was the only safe thing left in the world. He turned toward the car. Come on. Let's go see your mother. They each took a hand without hesitation. And as the doors of the black sedan closed around them, Michael Caine, billionaire, businessman, and now father, finally let the tears fall. Not because he was broken, but because something long buried had begun to breathe again. And in that breath, he heard her voice. She always said you'd find us one day. 6 years ago, before the courtroom gasps and the twins calling him Daddy, Michael Caine had been someone else entirely. Not a father. Not even a man who thought about children. He was simply a conqueror in a world made of numbers, strategies, and victories. Back then, he ruled boardrooms with a calm ruthlessness that earned both fear and admiration. His penthouse overlooked the city like a god's eye, far removed from the chaos below. But if one were to peer through the haze of his accomplishments, they'd see it, an emptiness, settled deep in his ribcage like dust gathering in a forgotten room. And it all started with a woman he never expected. Her name was Elena. They met by accident, or what felt like one. It was the winter fundraiser at St. Clement's, an event Michael never attended but had been guilt-tripped into sponsoring by his godmother. The ballroom shimmered in crystal and gold, 1,000 lights dangling like frozen stars from the ceiling. The champagne was too dry, the music too formal. He was already checking his watch when she spilled a glass of red wine on his cuff. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, napkin already in hand, her eyes wide with panic. He looked down. Burgundy bloomed like a wound on his tailored sleeve. He looked up. And everything else stopped. She wasn't dressed like the rest. No sequins, no polished pearls, no false smiles. Her hair was tied back in a way that suggested utility, not glamour. Her name tag was crooked. And her eyes, dark, soft, painfully real, didn't apologize like the rest of her. They challenged him, gently, like a question she didn't know she was asking. "I should go," she murmured, backing away, but he reached for her wrist before she could vanish. "Don't," he said. "Tell me your name first." "Elena." It should have ended there. It was a party, after all. She was just a catering assistant. He was a billionaire whose last relationship had ended when he forgot his girlfriend's birthday 3 years in a row. But something about her stayed with him. The tilt of her head. The way she didn't pretend. That night, he asked the event manager for the catering company's name. A week later, he called her under the pretense of handling a business lunch. "You need catering for 2 people," she asked over the phone. "Just one, actually." "You. I mean, with you." She laughed then, not mockingly, but in that disbelieving, too human way that made him smile. Their first real meeting happened in a quiet cafe far from the skyline he usually preferred. She wore a scarf knitted by her grandmother. He wore the same suit he'd worn to 3 investor meetings that day. And yet, for the first time in months, he wasn't checking emails under the table. They talked about real things. She asked him why he never smiled in magazine covers. He asked her what her dream job was, and she said, not to wake up tired. He told her he couldn't remember the last time someone looked at him like a person and not a paycheck. She told him, "You're a little tragic, you know that?" He chuckled, biting into a blueberry muffin. "That's the first time someone said that to me. Usually it's something like calculating or insufferable." She smirked. "I was being polite." And like that, they kept meeting. Week after week. His assistant didn't know where he vanished to every Friday afternoon. His boardroom was none the wiser. But Michael Caine, sharp, cold, untouchable, started keeping a photograph in his wallet. Of a girl laughing into a paper cup, snowflakes stuck in her hair. Elena never asked for anything. Not gifts. Not favors. She never even let him pay for coffee without a fight. And that's what made him fall. The lack of performance. The honesty of someone who had seen loss and didn't hide it behind designer masks. But he didn't fall gently. Michael didn't know how to do anything without going all in. He asked her to travel with him. She said no. "I have work," she explained, "and people who rely on me." He offered her a place in his firm. "You'd be brilliant in communications," he said. She declined. "I already have a voice. I don't need to speak your language to be heard." Still, they danced between their two worlds. Weekends in quiet bookstores. Nights walking beneath lamplight where no one recognized him. He stopped bringing his work phone. She started writing in a journal again. They became something neither could define, but both wanted desperately to preserve. And then came the storm. A sudden business trip. Geneva. 1 week, maybe 2. He asked her to come. She hesitated. They fought, not loudly, but in that aching way where neither wanted to say what they really meant. "If you leave now," she whispered, "you won't come back the same." He kissed her forehead. "I always come back." But he didn't. Not really. When he returned, the cafe was gone. Shut down. Her apartment, empty. No forwarding address. No messages. Only silence, loud enough to drown. He told himself it wasn't meant to last. He told himself it wasn't love. He buried it under work, under ambition, under the kind of noise that drowns everything tender. And slowly, the memory of her faded. Or so he thought. Until a week ago, when a letter appeared on his desk. No return address. Inside, a single sentence. "You never came back, but they deserve to know who you are." Attached was a photo. 2 girls. Blue eyes. Freckles. And a necklace he remembered all too well. He burned the letter. He ignored it. And then today, 2 girls on the courthouse steps. Calling him Daddy. Michael closed his eyes in the present, standing still in the past. Somewhere in between, Elena's voice still echoed, soft and accusing. "I'm not asking you to stay. I'm just asking you to remember." And for the first time in 6 years, he remembered everything. Every step. Every smile. Every goodbye that was never spoken. And the storm inside him, the one he had spent years keeping silent, finally began to roar. Elena hadn't meant to end up here, not in this place, not in this life. But after everything crumbled 7 years ago, the only thing that had kept her breathing was the thought of her daughter's faces. That, and the knowledge that no one else in the world would protect them if she didn't. Her days were long, stitched together by shifts at the bakery and the diner, sewing commissions at night, and sometimes, just sometimes, a few precious hours of silence when the twins were finally asleep. The apartment was barely livable. A one-bedroom above a worn-out laundromat, where the heater clanked like it was dying every winter, and the ceiling leaked if the rain persisted more than a day. But it was home, at least, the only one they could afford after being turned away from shelter after shelter. The twins shared a mattress in the corner, decorated with a blanket Elena had hand-stitched from donated fabric scraps. Their drawings, bright suns, crooked hearts, stick figures with curls, were taped to the walls. Most of them included a fourth figure. Tall. Handsome. Smiling. A man with blue eyes. "Mommy, that's him," Belle would whisper, pointing shyly. "He's in my dream again." Elena never corrected them. Never said he was just a dream. Because what do you say when the man in their drawings really does exist? What do you say when he once promised you forever, then vanished into silence, believing a lie you were forced to let live? She would wake before dawn each day, swallowing down nausea and exhaustion, pack peanut butter sandwiches, braid their hair, kiss their cheeks, and whisper, "We're gonna make it, okay?" Then she'd walk them to the bus stop, hiding the way her shoes pinched and her coat no longer zipped. Winter always came too soon for the poor. That night, when Daisy's fever climbed again, Elena had panicked. No health insurance. No relatives. No money for another emergency room bill. The last one had nearly cost her their place. She used an old remedy, steam, wet cloth, whispered lullabies. And when Belle crawled beside her sister, rubbing her back, saying, "You'll be okay, I'm right here," Elena had to bite her lip to keep from crying. She hadn't seen him in years. Not since that night she woke up in a private clinic with no memory of the accident, only the emptiness of her belly and the crushing knowledge that everything she loved was gone. Her father had come, cold and composed, telling her it was over, that the man she'd loved had moved on, that it was best to forget him. And because she had no strength to fight, she believed him, until the ultrasounds, until 2 tiny heartbeats made her vow to run and never look back. Sometimes she thought about calling. Just once. Saying his name into the phone. But what would she say? "I'm alive, and you're a father." It would have shattered whatever world he'd built. So she stayed away, like a ghost with a pulse. There was a small shoebox beneath her bed. Inside, worn edges of a photograph, a hospital bracelet, a crumpled boarding pass from the night she left the city, and a necklace, the only thing he ever gave her, engraved with a tiny E. It wasn't worth anything but everything. She never wore it. Only touched it when the world felt too heavy. The bakery owner liked her enough. Paid her under the table, let her take day olds. That day, while she was frosting cupcakes with trembling fingers, she heard the news through the radio. Cole Foundation announces new scholarship for displaced mothers. Her hands froze. Adrienne Cole. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. She thought she might drop the tray, but her fingers gripped tighter, the name echoing in her ribs like a knock at the door. Not just a man anymore. A brand. A billionaire. Unreachable. Untouchable. And yet, her girls had his eyes. That night, Belle drew again. A man in a suit. A car with golden rims. "I saw it today," she said dreamily, "on the big street by school. He looked at me, Mommy." Elena smiled thinly, brushing her daughter's bangs aside. "I'm sure he was just a kind stranger, baby." But her hands shook when she turned out the light. She couldn't sleep. Her mind spun. The scholarship. His face in the news. The eerie way Belle kept sketching a man she'd never met. And when Daisy whimpered in her sleep, Elena got up and paced. Her legs carried her to the drawer, to the shoebox, to the photograph. Him. And her. Arms around each other. Her smile too wide. his eyes too soft. The world had no idea. The storm came the next day. Wind like knives. She wrapped the girls in scarves and raincoats, praying the bus would be on time. But fate, as always, had other plans. On their walk home from the store, eggs, bread, medicine she couldn't afford, the brakes gave out. The sedan skidded. Her scream was the last thing she remembered. She woke hours later, confused, head spinning, unsure where she was or how the sky turned black. Belle's tearful face was the first thing she saw. "Mommy, we tried to wake you," the little voice broke, "but you wouldn't open your eyes." Beside her, Daisy shivered, clutching Elena's coat. They had dragged her off the road. Wrapped her in their arms. And when headlights flickered behind the trees, Belle pointed toward the lights. "I saw something shining. Maybe it's a house." They didn't know it was a mansion. They didn't know it belonged to the man fate had been circling around their whole lives. They only knew their mother needed help, and they would brave anything to get it. So they ran. Through the rain. Through the trees. Clutching each other. Hoping. Crying. Elena didn't see the moment they pressed their hands to his iron gate. Didn't hear the way their voices cracked as they begged. She only knew, later, when she opened her eyes in the back of a car, wrapped in a coat she remembered from another life, that everything had changed. And still, she didn't dare believe it. Not yet. Not even when Belle whispered, "He has your eyes, Mommy. Just like us." Not even then. Not even when her pulse betrayed her and whispered the name she hadn't said aloud in years. Adrian. Adrian didn't sleep that night. He sat at the edge of his bed, motionless, hands clasped together like a man praying to a god he no longer believed in. The girls' voices echoed in his skull, two words that didn't belong to him, yet carved themselves deep into his chest. Daddy. Not once, but twice. Two small voices, desperate, full of hope. He'd won his court case that morning, but the real verdict had hit him in the hallway, not the courtroom. And now, every trophy in his penthouse office felt hollow, every headline with his name like a cruel joke. He hadn't told anyone. Not his assistant, not his lawyers, not even the woman he had fought to keep out of his son's life. He couldn't speak the words. Not yet. Because if he did, they would become real. And he didn't know what was worse, the fear that it wasn't true, or the terrifying ache that it was. The next morning, he did something he hadn't done in over a decade. He walked to work. No car, no driver, no briefcase. Just the early sun and a coat too thin for the wind. The city looked different on foot. Less like a kingdom, more like a battlefield. Every street corner a memory. Every child's laugh a knife. When he got to his building, he didn't go inside. Instead, he crossed the street and stood beneath the old elm tree near the fountain. The same spot he used to meet her. Back when his life was simpler. Back when she called him Adrian, not Mr. Cole. Before the money, before the betrayals, before he chose ambition over everything else. He closed his eyes and remembered. It had rained that day too. Just like it did when the girls screamed. She was late. She was always late. Hair damp from the storm, cheeks flushed from running, clutching a paper bag with 2 croissants and a bottle of milk tea she insisted he would love, even though he hated sugar. "You need sweetness in your life," she had teased, handing him the cup. And he, a man who had spent his entire life chasing perfection, had laughed. Out loud. Like a fool in love. He opened his eyes. The tree hadn't changed. But he had. And he couldn't undo any of it. The twins. The girls in the hallway. They couldn't be more than 6. That meant, it aligned. The timeline. The breakup. The accident. The silence that followed. He'd always blamed her. Told himself she chose to vanish. That she regretted him, his world, his future. But now all he had were questions. He called the investigator. Not his usual guy. Someone new. Discreet. "Find me everything about a woman named Elena Marin," he said. 7 years ago. Disappeared after a car accident. No known relatives. 2 children. Possibly twins. The investigator hesitated. "You think she's alive?" Adrian stared out at the city. "I don't think anything. I just need to know." The next 48 hours passed like a slow-motion blur. Every meeting, every report, every financial projection felt pointless. He couldn't concentrate. Couldn't sit still. Couldn't stop seeing their faces. Identical. Bright-eyed. A little tired. A little bruised. And so painfully familiar. When the investigator finally called, Adrian's hands shook picking up the phone. "I found her," the man said. "She's alive." Adrian didn't breathe. "She's been living in a 1-bedroom unit above a laundromat in Brighton. Works 2 jobs. Single mother. Neighbors say she keeps to herself. Doesn't talk much. But she's good to the kids. Very protective." Adrian sank into his chair. "And the children?" "Both girls. Born 6 years ago, in March. No father listed on record. Their names are Belle and Daisy." He closed his eyes. Belle. Daisy. He hadn't even known they existed. Hadn't known she'd lived. The weight of that ignorance crushed him from the inside. "And there's more," the man added carefully. "Last week, they were seen approaching your estate. The gate camera caught them asking for help." Adrian stood up so fast his chair toppled. "What?" "They carried their mother there. She'd collapsed in the street. The girls walked almost a mile in the storm. One barefoot. They dragged her half that distance before someone spotted them." His heart stopped. The breath left his lungs. "Why wasn't I told?" he snapped, though he already knew the answer. The gatekeeper never reported it. It was just another night. Another stranger asking for help. Another file buried in the system. But it hadn't been a stranger. It had been them. He hung up without another word. That evening, he drove. Not with a driver. Not in the company car. In an old sedan he hadn't touched in years, the one she once spilled coffee in, laughing as she wiped it with her scarf. The smell of her perfume still faint in the leather. He didn't know what he was going to say. He didn't know what she would do. Slam the door in his face, maybe. Call the police. Cry. Or worse, say nothing at all. But he had to see her. He had to know. The building was worse than he imagined. Paint peeling. Stairs uneven. A broken window sealed with cardboard. He climbed anyway. Every step heavier than the last. At the top floor, he paused. Door 4B. The number scrawled in faded ink. He raised his hand, but couldn't knock. Inside, he could hear voices. 2 girls giggling. A woman humming. His throat closed. He turned to leave. But then the door opened. And there she was. Older. Tired. Beautiful. Elena. Holding a bowl of soup. Her hair pulled back. Eyes wide in disbelief. He froze. She blinked. Slowly. The bowl trembled in her hands. He started, but the words caught in his throat. Behind her, 2 small faces peeked out from the hallway. Belle and Daisy. And just like before, their eyes met his. He didn't speak. He knelt. Not because he meant to. Because his knees gave out. And the girls ran forward, no longer afraid. This time, they didn't scream, "Daddy." They whispered it. And it broke him clean in two. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was heavy, thick with things unsaid, questions unasked, years unlived. Adrian remained on his knees, the hallway light casting his shadow long behind him, as if all of his past mistakes stretched out there, clawing at his back. The twins didn't say another word. They only stepped closer, one on each side, small fingers wrapping around his hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. Elena didn't move. She stood in the doorway, the soup bowl trembling in her grasp, her mouth slightly parted as though caught between breath and memory. Her eyes darted between the girls and Adrian, like she was watching a dream she'd trained herself not to have anymore. Adrian looked up at her, slowly, like a man surfacing from deep underwater. "I didn't know," he whispered, voice hoarse, raw. "I swear to you, Elena. I didn't know." Her jaw clenched. Not in anger. In restraint. "I didn't come to your building for you," she said quietly. "I came for help." They wouldn't even open the gate. His face twisted, not in offense, but shame. "I found out too late. I saw the footage. I didn't recognize you. I didn't recognize them. God, Elena. You weren't supposed to." Her voice was steady now. "Guarded. That life you left behind. I buried it. With the old me." He stood slowly, the girl's hands still holding his as if they were afraid he'd vanish if they let go. His eyes scanned her face, searching for the woman he once knew beneath the exhaustion and quiet sorrow. "And them?" he asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. She looked at her daughters, Belle's hair falling messily across one cheek, Daisy's shoelace dragging untied, and something shifted in her expression. The armor cracked. Just a little. "They never asked why they didn't have a father," she said softly. "Until 3 weeks ago. Belle drew a family tree at school. She left your branch blank." Adrian swallowed hard. "And then," Elena continued, "Daisy found an old picture of you and me. The one I kept hidden in a box I thought they'd never open. She said you looked like her. I told her it was just coincidence." She shook her head. "But they're smart. Too smart. They look like you," he said, eyes glistening. "They act like you," she countered. "Stubborn. Curious. Brave to the point of foolish." The girls looked between them, confused but oddly calm, as if sensing this conversation wasn't meant for interruption. Adrian finally released their hands, kneeling again to meet their gaze. "Belle," he said. "Daisy." They nodded, wide-eyed. "I don't know if you remember me from that day outside the court," he said, voice low. "But I remember you now. And if your mom lets me, I'd like to remember you for the rest of my life." Neither answered. But Daisy smiled. The smallest curve of her lips. And it was enough to undo him again. Elena stepped back. "Come inside," she said simply. "Before the neighbors start watching." He entered her apartment for the first time. Small. Dim, a single couch with a patch sewn into the cushion. Walls lined with children's drawings and second-hand books. The air smelled like lavender and cheap detergent. But it was warm. Lived in. Full of memory. He didn't sit until she motioned. And when he did, he chose the edge of the couch, posture stiff, like he didn't belong. The twins curled up on the floor nearby, pulling out coloring books as if the gravity of the moment didn't touch them. As if their world was still intact, because in their minds, it had always included him, even if only in dreams. Elena leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching him like a woman who had learned not to trust the things that once made her heart race. "How long?" he asked. "Since the accident," she replied. 6 years. "You almost died." "I did." She met his eyes. "But I didn't want you to know." His chest sank. Why? Because if you knew, she said, you might have come back. And I was afraid, not of you. Of what you'd do to them. I would never. You would have loved them, she interrupted. And then disappeared again. Just like you did to me. He flinched. You loved your career more than me, she said, not bitter, just honest. I wasn't going to let them feel that. I was scared, he admitted, finally. Of being ordinary. Of losing everything I built. Of becoming someone's husband before I was finished being someone important. And did it work out for you? He looked around. At the cheap floor lamp. At the twins whispering about crayon colors. At Elena, tired but strong. Then back to his hands, trembling in his lap. No, he whispered. Not even close. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Elena walked over to the bookshelf, pulled down a frame, and handed it to him. Inside was the picture, weathered and faded, of the two of them. Arms wrapped around each other. Laughing. Younger. Simpler. A time when Adrian hadn't yet become the man who'd trade love for legacy. I kept this, she said. Not because I wanted to. But because I couldn't let go of who you were before the world made you choose. He looked at the picture. And then at her. I want to be him again. That man died, she said. The night you walked away. He nodded slowly. Then looked down at the photo. Then let me be someone better. Elena didn't answer. Instead, she crouched beside her daughters. Whispered something neither of them repeated. And when she rose again, she turned to Adrian with the same expression she wore when she left the courtroom years ago, wounded, guarded, but never cruel. They need time, she said. I need time. He stood. I'll give it. All of it. Just, don't shut the door forever. She nodded. Then hesitated. And in the softest voice, almost too quiet to hear, she said, you never came to the hospital. I didn't know, he whispered. Now you do. He turned to the girls. Thank you for not forgetting me. Even when I didn't deserve it. Belle walked over and handed him a crayon drawing. A house. A stick figure man with glasses. Two little girls on either side. A woman in the doorway. Above it, written in shaky pink letters. If we had a dad. Adrian held the paper like it was made of glass. And this time, he didn't cry. But he knew, he would never forget again. Adrian returned the next evening. Not with flowers, or grand speeches, or anything that might feel like guilt dressed as generosity. He came with a quiet knock and a brown paper bag filled with groceries. Eggs, bread, milk, 2 cartons of strawberry yogurt with cartoon characters he hoped the girls might like. The moment the door opened, he held it up like a peace offering. Elena raised one brow, arms folded, and said nothing. But she stepped aside to let him in. That was more than enough. The girls were seated on the floor, playing with puzzle pieces, corners bent, box taped. Belle glanced up and saw him first. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say a word. She nudged Daisy, who turned, blinked, then offered a small smile like a secret being handed back. Adrian crouched beside them and said, "Do you need help with that piece?" Daisy shook her head. "No. But you can watch." And so he did. He watched them argue softly over whether the tree piece went to the left or the right. He watched them build something together without knowing that his presence was the final corner of that puzzle. It wasn't long before Belle leaned her head against his arm. Adrian didn't move. He let the silence stretch. Let it wrap around them like something sacred. Elena emerged from the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour. "I'm making flatbread. Want to help?" she asked, not to him, but to the girls. But it was Daisy who turned to Adrian and tugged his sleeve. "Can he help too?" Elena's eyes met his. She hesitated. Then gave a single nod. 10 minutes later, flour clung to his black slacks like snowfall. He had no idea how to roll dough into circles, and Belle giggled every time he flattened his into a lopsided star. Elena didn't laugh, but the corners of her mouth betrayed her. There was something surreal about watching this man, once featured on magazine covers and finance panels, sitting at her tiny kitchen table with sleeves rolled up and dough under his fingernails. At one point, she stepped out to answer a call from her boss, and Adrian found himself alone with the girls. Belle glanced over at him and whispered, "You know Mom sings when she's happy?" Daisy nodded solemnly. "She hasn't sung in a long time." Adrian looked between them. "What did she used to sing?" Belle shrugged. "Stuff from the radio. And songs she made up. Mostly about breakfast or lost socks." Adrian chuckled. "Those are the best kind." Daisy tilted her head. "Do you sing?" He paused. "Only when I think no one's listening." "Then sing now," Belle said. "We won't tell." "I'm not sure I remember how," he murmured. Daisy reached into a drawer and pulled out a recorder. "You can try with this." He took it, pretending to examine it like a serious instrument. Then he pressed one wrong note, and both girls erupted into laughter that filled the apartment like sun through dusty blinds. Elena returned just in time to hear them giggling, to see Adrian pretending to conduct an invisible orchestra with a plastic spoon. She leaned against the doorway, watching with an unreadable expression. Something softer. Something older. Not quite forgiveness. But not far from it either. After dinner, when the girls were brushing their teeth and singing in unison, something about bubble gum and pirates, Elena sat across from Adrian with a mug of tea clasped between her hands. She didn't say anything for a long time. Neither did he. Finally, she asked, "Why didn't you ever try to find me?" His breath hitched, the words caught somewhere behind guilt and fear. "Because I thought you'd moved on. I assumed, maybe hoped, you were better off without me." "You hoped I forgot you?" she asked quietly. "I hoped I didn't ruin you," he corrected. "But I see now, it's not about forgetting. It's about what I made you carry alone." She stared at her tea like it could rewrite the years. "You left after I told you I was pregnant." "No," he said. "I left before you could." She blinked. "What?" He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I knew. I saw the appointment card on your nightstand the morning I left. I panicked. I told myself if I walked out before you told me, it wouldn't be real. That I could still fix my career. That love, family, were things I wasn't made for." Elena stared at him, eyes narrowing, not in anger, but in disbelief. "I never stopped thinking about it," he continued. "But every year that passed, it got harder to believe I deserved any way back. Until that day in court. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just said, 'Coward.'" He nodded. "Completely." She stood, took her mug to the sink, and rinsed it under cold water. "You broke something, Adrian. Something I had to spend years gluing back together with bedtime stories and soft lies. I want to be part of their lives," he said, rising. "Whatever that means. Whatever it takes." She turned off the tap. "You don't get to make promises now." "I'm not," he said. "I'm making apologies. One at a time. As many as you'll let me." He looked toward the hallway where the girls' laughter had faded into bedtime hush. "They deserve better." "Yes," she said. "And so do I." The door buzzed. A neighbor passing through the corridor. A sound like the end of a conversation. Adrian grabbed his coat. "I'll see myself out." She nodded, still not looking at him. But as he opened the door, he heard her voice behind him. "Quiet. Tired. They'll expect you to come again tomorrow." He paused. Turned his head. "Elena." "Don't be late," she said, and shut the door behind him. The hallway was cold again. But it didn't feel like it was closing in anymore. Not this time. The following week blurred into a rhythm Adrian hadn't known he needed. He found himself waking earlier, walking with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. The car waited for him every morning, but more often than not, he chose to take the subway, surrounded by strangers who didn't care he once graced magazine covers. For the first time, he wasn't hurrying toward a boardroom, he was hurrying to be on time for Belle and Daisy. Each afternoon, he brought something small. A book. A puzzle. Once, just a packet of colorful hairbands that made Belle squeal and Daisy raise one eyebrow before shyly picking the green one. Elena didn't always say much, but she began to smile more. Her tone thawed. They no longer felt like survivors from different storms, but co-captains navigating the same fragile boat. Until Tuesday. The day everything Adrian thought he'd begun to rebuild, cracked again, this time, from the inside. It started with a drawing. A simple one. Crayon on scrap paper. Adrian found it on the kitchen table, nestled between two plastic cups of apple juice. He assumed it was just another of the girl's colorful masterpieces. But when he looked closer, he froze. There, beneath the scribbled sun and a stick figure house, were three people. Two small girls, identical down to their pink dresses and uneven pigtails. A woman in a yellow skirt, hair long and dark. And beside them, a man. But this man wasn't just any figure. He was bald. Not from age, but from illness. His drawn eyes were closed. And above his head was a halo. Adrian's stomach twisted. Elena walked in, wiping her hands on a towel. She paused when she saw what he was holding. "Who drew this?" "Belle," she said simply. He looked at her. "Who's the man?" She hesitated. A beat too long. Then quietly, "Their father." Adrian set the drawing down like it had caught fire. "I thought you said." "I never said anything," she interrupted, voice soft but unshakable. "You never asked." 1,000 questions tangled in his throat. He knew the answer to one of them, and he feared it most. "Elena, is he dead?" She nodded. 3 years ago. Lymphoma. It was fast. Too fast. The air between them thickened. Adrian felt the walls shift inside his chest. "They think he was their dad." She nodded again. "And he was?" Her silence wasn't sharp. It was tired. "He was their father," she said slowly. "In every way that mattered. He raised them. Held their hands through nightmares. Braided their hair, made them believe they were safe. He never once made them feel like they were someone else's burden." Adrian blinked. "Someone else's?" "You left, Adrian." He stayed. "That's the only truth they know." "But biologically, it doesn't matter." He stepped back like she'd slapped him. Elena's voice cracked for the first time in days. "You don't get to walk in now and rewrite their memories." He wanted to scream that he wasn't trying to. That he only wanted a place, a chance, something. But nothing he could say would unpaint that drawing. Nothing would undo the bedtime stories told by someone else, the lullabies whispered by a man who hadn't run. "They'll always love him," she added. "I'm not asking them not to." "Then what are you asking?" Adrian looked down at his hands. They shook. From anger or shame, he couldn't tell. Maybe both. "I don't know. I want to understand what I missed. Who I could have been. Who I might still be." Elena stared at him. Her eyes shimmered. "Then don't take anything from them. Just be there. If you really mean it." The door buzzed again, Daisy, running in from the bedroom, holding a ribbon. She paused when she saw the tension, then skipped over and climbed into Adrian's lap like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "I made this for you," she said. A red ribbon tied around a bent paperclip. "It's for your keys. So you don't lose them." He took it in both hands like it was glass. "Thank you, Daisy." She grinned. "You're welcome, Mr. A." He chuckled. "Mr. A?" Belle peeked from the hallway. "We thought it was better than Mr. Bald Guy." Adrian laughed, then caught Elena's eyes again. They weren't cold anymore. They weren't open either. But they were, watching. The following day, Adrian went to the only place that still held the ghosts he hadn't faced, his own penthouse. A place too polished, too symmetrical. He hadn't stepped foot there since he left the firm, since he told his assistant to cancel everything indefinitely. Now, he stood in the doorway, staring at shelves lined with trophies, photographs with people he no longer called friends, and not a single picture of the life he could have had. He spent hours tearing through files. Legal. Financial. Medical. Old notebooks. Somewhere in the third drawer of his study, beneath pages of acquisition plans, he found it. A letter. Folded and smudged. The date on it was the week Elena had tried to tell him she was pregnant. The handwriting was hers. "Adrian. I don't know if you'll ever read this. Maybe I'll be too afraid to give it to you. Maybe you'll never come back. But if you do, they'll have your eyes. They already do. I saw them on the sonogram today. I don't need your name or your wealth. I just wanted them to know, their father was brave once. Even if only for a moment. Even if he forgets." He sat back in the leather chair he once called his throne and broke down. It wasn't anger this time. It wasn't shame. It was the weight of knowing that love had come to him once. Quiet. Fragile. Asking for so little. And he had slammed the door. Now he was the one knocking. Hoping someone was still home. The next morning, Adrian stood outside the elementary school's iron gate. It was earlier than drop-off, earlier than any parent had a reason to be there. He leaned against the black bars, hands deep in the pockets of his coat, eyes fixed on the playground beyond. It was empty now, swing still, chalk faded, the echo of children's laughter tucked away in yesterday's wind. But he wasn't there for the silence. He was waiting for the sound that had kept him up all night, a child's voice calling his name. Not as a stranger. Not as a visitor. But as something more terrifying. More real. As Dad. He had read the letter 5 times. Memorized each word until it carved itself into the softest places of him, the places he had spent decades building walls around. Her words didn't accuse. They didn't beg. They simply existed, like an unopened gift he had walked away from. And now that he knew, he could never unknow. The sound of a car door pulled him from thought. He turned. There they were. Elena stepped out first, adjusting the straps of 2 small backpacks. Belle and Daisy clambered out next, both in matching coats, one dragging a lunchbox, the other humming a tune that made Elena smile, even through tired eyes. Adrian didn't move. He waited, letting the moment arrive on its own. Belle spotted him first. She didn't say anything. Just stared, as if trying to confirm that he was real, that he hadn't just belonged to a series of after-school surprises. Then Daisy turned. Her voice sliced through the air. "Daddy!" Elena froze. So did every parent nearby. Daisy ran. Not toward her mother. Not toward her classroom. But straight toward Adrian. He didn't move. Couldn't. His breath caught halfway up his chest, and for a second, his knees threatened to buckle. "Daddy!" Belle joined now, chasing her sister, arms flung wide. They collided into him. Arms around his waist. smiles wide, unaware, or uncaring, that the world had just shifted on its axis. A teacher called from the door. "Girls, wait." But they didn't wait. They clung to him like gravity, like they had been waiting longer than he had. Elena approached slowly. Her expression unreadable. "Girls," she said softly. "Remember what we talked about?" Belle looked up. "But you said it was okay to love people who love you." Elena knelt down beside them. "I did say that. And Mr. A loves us," Daisy added. "So, he's kinda like a daddy. Right?" Elena's gaze lifted to Adrian's. She didn't look angry. Just exhausted. And terrified. And underneath it all, relieved. He nodded once. If it's okay, I could walk them in." She hesitated. Then stood. Just to the door. So he did. The girls held his hands, one on each side, chattering about their art project and a class hamster and a birthday party next week. Adrian listened, laughed where he could, and fought the burning behind his eyes. At the classroom threshold, they both hugged him once more. "I made you a picture," Belle whispered. "I'll give it to you after school." "I'll be there," he said. "I promise." Elena didn't say anything as they walked back. The silence stretched between them until they reached her car. "I didn't tell them to call you that," she said. "I know. They just started doing it." "I know," he said again, voice lower. "And I didn't come here expecting anything. I just couldn't not come." She leaned against the car, arms folded. "You think this is easy for me?" "No. You think it's simple. That now you know, you just get to show up and..." "No, Elena. I don't think that. I know I can't undo anything. I know he was there, and I wasn't. And I won't pretend I deserve anything from you or them." "Then why are you here?" He reached into his coat and handed her the letter. The one she wrote. Years ago. Before the girls. Before the grave. Before all the lines between them shattered. "I found this," he said. "I should have read it when it mattered. But I didn't. I was too afraid. Too proud. Too broken to see what was real." She didn't take it. She just stared at it. "I'm not asking to replace him. I couldn't. I wouldn't. But maybe I can add something. Not for me. For them." Her eyes flickered. "You think you can just walk in and parent two girls who lost the only father they've ever known?" "No," he admitted. "But I can start by being there. One school pickup at a time. One drawing at a time. If they let me." A long silence. Then she whispered, "They're not the only ones who lost something." He looked up. "I lost you too, Adrian. Not just the man I loved, but the man I trusted to care about more than himself. I know. I don't know if he's still in there. I don't either. But I'm trying to find him. Every day. Because he knew you were worth it. And so are they." Her jaw clenched. Then she took the letter. Read the first few lines. And didn't say a word. He stepped back. "I'll wait for your call," he said. "Or not. But I'll still be at that gate at 3 p.m. Just in case." He turned away. Didn't see the tears that spilled down her cheek. Didn't hear the soft whisper she muttered under her breath. But he felt it. The beginning of forgiveness. Not loud. Not swift. But real. And that was more than enough. That evening, Adrian stood in front of the apartment building he once drove past 1,000 times without ever stopping. The sun had dipped low, throwing long shadows across the sidewalk, as if time itself were stretching out the moment. He had no plan. No grand speech. Just a pair of tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The apartment was modest, second floor, right above the little florist shop that always smelled like sweet soil and something faintly citrus. He saw the soft orange light in the window. He knew they were home. He hesitated at the door. Because he knew, some mistakes don't come with a second chance. Some people don't get to knock twice. But he had to try. When the door opened, it wasn't Elena. It was Belle. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she stood frozen. Then she turned her head back toward the hallway. "Mom!" Elena appeared behind her, towel around her shoulders, hair damp from the shower. She didn't look surprised to see him. Just tired. Again. She stepped forward, silently instructing Belle to go back inside. Adrian spoke before she could close the door. "I didn't come to change your mind. Or rush anything. He held up a small notebook. "Daisy gave me this. It's her drawings. She left it in my car." Elena didn't move. He glanced down at the notebook, then back at her. "Anne. I added a page." She hesitated. Took it. Flipped to the back. There was a rough pencil sketch. Two little girls. Standing in front of a tall man with messy hair and tired eyes. They were holding his hands. Above the figures were 4 simple words, "Thank you for waiting." She looked at it for a long moment. Then closed the notebook slowly. "You drew that?" "I haven't drawn anything in years," he said. "I used to do it when I couldn't sleep." She leaned her forehead against the doorframe, letting out a slow breath. Inside, the girls laughed about something. A sound too full of life to belong in a room so heavy. Adrian lowered his voice. "Elena. I know I didn't deserve the way they called me, Dad, this morning. I know that." She didn't stop him. "And I also know you don't owe me anything. Not space. Not explanation. Not even forgiveness. Still nothing. But I also know I can't run anymore. I've spent my whole life building things to protect myself. A company. A reputation. A life. But it all feels like glass now. Thin. Fragile. Breakable. Those girls, you're the only thing that ever felt real." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then why did you leave?" His chest rose sharply. "I was scared," he said. "Not of you. Of what you meant. You looked at me like I was more than what I'd been. And I wasn't ready to be that man. I gave you everything," she said, her voice cracking. "And when I needed someone to believe me, to stay, you disappeared." "I know," he said, not flinching. "And I would give anything to take that night back." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. He stepped closer. "I'm not asking for a second chance with you. Not yet. Maybe never. But I'm asking for a chance to be a presence. To show them they matter. That they weren't a mistake I forgot, but a miracle I finally found the courage to see." She looked down. At her bare feet. At the threshold between everything she had become and the man she once thought she'd marry. "I can't promise anything, Adrian," she said. "Not after everything." "I wouldn't believe you if you did," he replied, gently. "But I'll be outside the school again tomorrow. And the day after. Not because I expect to be called their father. But because I want to earn whatever they decide to call me." A long pause. Then, for the first time in years, Elena didn't slam the door. She simply let it close, slowly, until it clicked shut behind her. Adrian turned. And walked away. But that night, he didn't return to his penthouse. He drove past it. Kept going. Until he reached the old neighborhood, his childhood street. He parked beside a broken street lamp, next to the chain-link fence that used to guard a baseball field. It was still there. So was the tree he carved his initials into when he was 13. The swing he pushed his younger brother on. The concrete where he first bled. He sat on the hood of his car and watched the sky change. From indigo to ash. And he thought of the twins. Of the moment Belle reached up and touched his face and asked, "Why do you look like me?" He had no answer then. But now. Now he would have one. Because he was going to know every part of their lives. Every dance recital. Every bedtime story. Every fever and scraped knee. Even if he was only a shadow on the sidewalk for a while, he would still be there. Because Adrian Blackwell, CEO of the largest firm in the state, had just discovered the only thing he couldn't buy, or build, or bluff his way into. Belonging. And for the first time, he wanted to be worthy of it. Not just for them. But for the boy he used to be, the one who sat on this very corner and swore no one would ever see how much he needed to be loved. That night, as dawn crept over the city, he took out his phone and left a voicemail he didn't know if she'd hear. "Good night, Elena. Good night, Belle. Good night, Daisy. Sleep well. I'll see you in the morning." Then he hung up. And waited for the sun. Just like he promised. The morning air smelled like spring and new beginnings, a strange kind of hope Adrian hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He stood across the street from the elementary school gates, dressed in nothing like the tailored suits of the courtroom days. No polished shoes. No gold tie clips. Just a navy sweater, rolled up sleeves, and the look of a man who had run out of things to prove. Across the road, the world continued as if it had never been broken. Parents walked their children to class. A teacher blew her whistle and waved at the crossing guards. Birds trilled above rows of cherry blossoms, still budding but full of quiet promise. Then, a flash of color, 2 backpacks, swinging side to side. 2 identical heads of honey blonde hair bouncing with every step. Belle and Daisy. They reached the gate, holding each other's hands, bright-eyed and chatter-filled. Adrian didn't call out. He simply waited. Daisy saw him first. She paused. Then turned to her sister. They exchanged a look. And just like that, both girls sprinted across the sidewalk, no hesitation, no fear, arms wide open. He dropped to one knee. Caught them mid-run. Their small bodies crashed into him, laughing, breathless. "You came," Daisy whispered against his shoulder. "I told you I would," he murmured, voice breaking as he held them tighter than he ever thought he'd dare. Belle pulled back slightly, enough to look up into his face. "Mom said we could say it. If we wanted." His heart skipped. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. "And we do," Daisy added. Together, they whispered, "Daddy." The word hit him like thunder, then washed over him like rain. Not courtroom titles. Not magazine covers. Not Blackwell Enterprises. Just Daddy. And he broke. Not with loud sobs, but the silent kind. The kind that shakes your whole chest and makes you believe, maybe for the first time, that you've finally been forgiven. He kissed the tops of their heads. One. Then the other. And when he opened his eyes, Elena stood across the street. She hadn't come to him. She hadn't smiled. But she had shown up. And in this world Adrian had learned to see differently, that was enough. He walked the girls back toward the gate. They tugged his hands. "Walk us in?" Belle asked. "Yeah, Daddy. Please." Daisy chimed. He looked across the street at their mother. She gave a single nod. So he did. Inside, they found their cubbies. Daisy stuffed her sketchbook inside with care. Belle pulled out a bracelet from her pocket, the red one, and tied it onto Adrian's wrist without saying a word. "I want it back later," she teased, smiling up at him. "You better come claim it," he answered, ruffling her hair. A teacher called their names. They turned to go, but not before Belle tiptoed back and hugged him one more time. And then they were gone. The hallway quiet again. And Adrian, alone again, but not empty. Not anymore. He stepped back into the sun. Elena waited under the tree, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He approached slowly. "I didn't expect that," he said. "They asked me," she replied softly. "If they could call you that." He blinked. "And you said yes." "I said it's not about what I think anymore. It's about what they feel." A long silence stretched between them. A soft breeze carried a petal past her cheek. He wanted to brush it away but didn't. "Elena," he said, "I know we're 1,000 miles from who we were. I don't want to pretend we can just rewind the past." "Good," she said, folding her arms tighter. "Because we can't. I just want to move forward," he added. "From wherever you're willing to let me stand." Another long pause. Then she said, quietly, "I'm not the girl who waited at that cafe, Adrian. I'm not the girl who kept checking her phone. I know. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Not with me. But with them." She finally looked at him. And this time, the wall behind her eyes had cracks. "With them," she said, "you've already started showing up. And that matters more than you know." His chest filled with something warm and aching. "Can I keep showing up?" he asked. "For lunch duty, for field trips, for dance recitals that I'll cry through even if I pretend not to?" She almost smiled. "Then don't pretend." He did smile. The real kind. The one she hadn't seen in years. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded envelope. "What's that?" "An extra copy of their birth certificates," she said. "Just in case, you want to fill out the forms at school. Officially." He took it with hands that shook more than they should. "Elena. I'm not giving you everything back," she warned, still firm. "I wouldn't dare ask for it," he replied. "But if I can earn even half the trust one lost." She finally let a soft breath escape. And for a fleeting second, they just stood there. Not lovers. Not enemies. Just two people who had loved, lost, and found something small and delicate again. As she turned to leave, he called out. "Elena." She stopped. "Thank you. For letting me be their father. Even if just one morning at a time." She didn't turn. But her voice carried back over her shoulder. "Don't make me regret it." Then she walked away. And he watched her go, not with longing or regret, but with respect. Because love wasn't always fireworks and confessions. Sometimes, it was showing up at the school gate. Sometimes, it was kneeling in the dirt and letting two girls break your heart wide open. And sometimes, it was knowing you couldn't fix the past, but you could be better, starting now. Adrian looked down at the bracelet on his wrist. Tied by a hand that didn't know it had saved him. The red thread of a promise he almost didn't deserve. But now, he would protect it with everything. Because this wasn't the end. It was the first real beginning he'd ever had. And this time, he wouldn't run. He would stay. He would show up. Every single day. And one day, when Belle and Daisy looked up at him and called him Daddy again, he'd know in his bones. He had finally become one.